Welcome back to the People channel. So today we have the 155K Q&A. So let's jump right into your top 20 questions. So question number 20, is it even worth spending phases focusing on strength if all you're interested in is hypertrophy? Now there was one study that pointed to this potentially being useful. I personally have not found it to be the case. I think maybe part of it depends on how much investment you are making in strength. If you suddenly start straight up becoming a powerlifter and doing a whole bunch of really specific training, well, that is training money, energy, time, focus, recovery that could be better spent, in my opinion. So if you're doing a whole bunch of heavy squats and deadlifts and bench presses, it kind of squeezes out the rest of your program because those are very big and very taxing lift. So if you do it that way, I would say it's actually probably counterproductive. However, if you take lifts that you are already doing and perhaps you throw in a single top heavier set, or you're trying to get your foot in the door with a heavy triple or a set of 4, set of 5, I think that can actually be a good way to drive progression. And that actually does seem to potentiate the more moderate weights. You might find that you have a better mind-muscle connection with the moderate weights. You might find that it just feels a little bit lighter than it otherwise would. So yeah, I think that especially on the bigger compound movements, but sometimes also the isolations, going up and doing a heavy triple or heavy set of 5 or FAV, whatever your preference, and then doing your more moderate, say 8 to 12 rep work can be a good strategy. And it gives you a little bit of something to chase after as well. Oh, now you're turning your triples into sets of 5, into sets of 7, and you're sort of progressing that way. Whereas sometimes just always doing straight sets across, 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 12, can get a little monotonous at times. Question number 19, I have been running the same program for a year now, seeing good results. What are signs that you need to start adding more volume to keep growing for novice/intermediate lifters? Well, if you're seeing good progress, I would not be as quick to add volume as a lot of people are, and certainly not as quick to add volume as I used to be. I used to be like, yeah, volume, that's what the thing is. That's what drives the progression. Look at all the studies. They all point to more being better. But I think in reality, as long as you are seeing good results, I wouldn't necessarily add more volume, because there is a little bit of the grass is always greener on the other side of the road or pasture or wherever you are type of situation where you think that, oh, I'm seeing good results, but I could see better results. I could see even faster results if I just did more. But in a lot of cases, that is actually what causes you either to plateau or for the set quality to go down. So first focus on your technique, dial that in, and then focus on the effort and the proximity to failure. And then if you plateau and you're feeling good and recovered, only really at that point would I start adding in volume. And it's almost in some ways as a last resort, as a way to drive progression. Not just let's do more sets because that always drives better progress, because in a lot of cases, it does not. Hammer curls for biceps training, or is the forearm strength a limiting factor here? It might be if you have quite weak forearms. I have never felt like my grip was giving out on a hammer curl, but then again, I have some pretty decent forearms. And to me, this is almost a feature, not a bug. For a lot of movements, people can point to, oh, this could be the limiting factor. Yeah, or it could not be the limiting factor if you got it stronger. So I would say if your forearm strength is limiting you, either because your grip is giving out and the dumbbell is slipping through, in that case, you can just grip the top of the shaft, the top of the dumbbell shaft, and suddenly the dumbbell is pressing against your hand, and you can, that's not really an issue anymore. You might find that your wrist starts to move. I've seen some, what is his name? I think Tristan Lee, where he's doing a dumbbell curl and his wrist is like all the way bent back. If he feels fine, it's probably not actually risky or dangerous. But if you're getting pain, maybe don't do that, or lighten the weight, or choose a different variation, sure. But yeah, I love hammer curls. I do hammer curls all the time. I think they're an excellent movement. I think they're underrated. I think that if you skip them, it's probably not the end of the world, but certainly worth trying at a minimum. All right, next question, number 17. I've heard your advice about the importance of cardio for hypertrophy and want to try incorporating it into my routine preferably running, because I can't afford to spend more time at the gym. However, I don't quite know how I should fit it in with my bodybuilding as the main goal. If I need to run on a day adjacent to leg training, if I run a 2 times torso bro leg split, would it be better to run on the day before or after leg day? Love the vids and always appreciate the pragmatic advice. No problem. So I would say as long as it's not on the leg day, it's fine. There are pros and cons to having it either before or after. Personally, I do my cardio on the day before a leg day, but I also don't really do a lot of running, especially when I'm really, really bulked up, because it is hard to recover from. So there is a lot of pounding, impact. Yes, you can adapt, but that is still going to be a recovery cost no matter what. You can only adapt to so much, and you kind of have to keep adapting and recovering. And so, yeah, running is definitely the hardest form of cardio that I can think of. And so I typically do either walking on the incline treadmill or exercise bike, just because it is easier to recover from. You could do it either before or after. Before might impact the leg day slightly. And so if that is a priority, I would probably just put it after. You might not feel 100% for the cardio, but it shouldn't impact your recovery if it's a full 24 hours after, unless you're doing a very, very large and excessive amount of running or overall cardio. So I would probably put it after if you can. On your torso bro leg split, this would mean on that second torso day, so torso bro legs, torso, you would do your cardio, bro legs, and then I guess you would do cardio on the day off. And so, yeah, that would work best. Personally, I do legs, torso, bro. And so I do it on the bro day before the leg day, which seems to work pretty well, and it doesn't impact performance. But again, I'm not running, which could be a significant difference. Next question. Hi, Geoff. How do you think training should change as the years go by? I'm slightly younger than you. How do you think you'll adapt as you age? Thank you for being such a nice guy. No problem. Well, first of all, I don't think it should change all that much. I get people come to me and they say, oh, I'm 40 years old. How should I train? How is it different from when I was 20? It doesn't change very much. It might be your recovery is slightly slower, but it should not be dramatically slower. I think in a lot of cases, this is either people getting out of shape. So maybe they're not doing as much cardio. Maybe they have more of life going on, more responsibilities, more stress, worse diet, worse sleep. And so I don't think this is necessarily age, but is a lot of the stuff that goes along with age. A lot of people who are 18, 20, 22 years old, they don't necessarily have the same types of responsibilities as someone might have in their 30s and then 40s and then 50s. And then often actually in their 60s, life responsibilities sort of go down in a lot of cases. But then I think that is where the age actually does matter. So I would say inherently the age doesn't matter all that much until you're around 60, maybe 65, maybe 55, somewhere in that range. And that is where I might have a little bit lower volume. I might choose exercises that are a little bit more joint friendly, that type of stuff. But either way, you just have to listen to your body. You have to go by feel. You have to be observant. The differences between people are way, way more different than the differences that are going to be happening as you personally age. So either way, you have to auto-regulate, and things might change gradually, but they won't change quickly and they won't change much either. By the way, this video is sponsored by Boostcamp. So you should be tracking and managing your training. Otherwise, it makes progression quite difficult. You're not going to remember every single set you do. And it is essential to know that for proper progression. And Boostcamp is the best way to do that. Plus, you get access to some of the best hypertrophy and other goal training plans as well. I myself have a bunch of plans up there. Most of them are free. The app as a whole is free as well. Or you can use code GVS for 2 free weeks of premium if you want to try that out. So thank you to Boostcamp for sponsoring this video. In terms of practical observations, I have noticed that injuries seem to take a little bit longer to heal for older guys. And so you might want to be a little bit more risk averse. I've noticed a lot of people, they start out their lifting career maybe pressing out here, And then they sort of gradually tuck a little bit because that seems to be a little bit more shoulder friendly on average. They might keep a little bit stricter form on their hinges. They might, pause at the bottom of a squat, that kind of thing. And these small changes are going to be necessary in some cases. Next question from Jonathan Warren. What's up, dude? I did a full podcast with him if you want to check it out on his channel. I will try to remember to link it below. Best under the radar content creators. I'm not including myself, lol. Genuinely interested. I'm going to say Faz lifts on this one. He just passed 10K, so he is rising up, and he might be over the radar. The radar might be detecting him, hopefully more after this shout out. Excellent content, very, very reasonable, very, very logical. I really like his stuff. Just straight to the point, no flashy editing or anything. Just genuine, heartfelt, experience-based, useful information. Next question. I've been lifting for 4 years, still can't get out of the turtle build. Turtle.
But am I not turtly enough for the turtle club?
Is he okay?
My squats, deadlifts, and bench and presses are pretty high. I've been following your Ravage program for the past month. Any tips for growing my arm thickness, bis, and tris? Seems like my most stubborn muscle to grow. It's 15, excuse me. It's 15.5 inches when flexed, but goes down to 13.5 when relaxed. And looks like I don't even lift from the front. I'm 6'1" at 92 kilos, by the way. So, good news is you're following a good program. And a month is not a very long time, so keep at it. That should be effective. I would say focus on the brachialis. So hammer curls, either with dumbbells, cables, those both work. I would actually also maybe focus on reverse grip curls, which are also going to work the brachialis, but a lot of forearm as well. I think that's what a lot of people are lacking. And then also, I would focus on long head of the triceps. Of course, my specialty. If you're flexing, it is this sweepy boy down here. But when you're relaxed, especially if you have lats, and it sounds like you probably do, you didn't name pull-ups here, but if you're torso dominant, you probably have decent lats, I would say. Your lats kind of press against long head of the triceps. I'm wearing a pretty baggy sweatshirt, so you can't really see it necessarily, but it makes them press out and everything sweeps around. And so, yeah, long head of the triceps, and then brachialis would be the go-tos. And then I would also maybe keep pretty strict form. That's one thing that I see a lot of torso dominant people when they're curling, they kind of like do this kind of stuff. When they're extending, they're kind of like getting some pressing involved. So make sure the elbow is really what you are focusing on. Next question, straight sets, 100 kilos and 5x5 versus ramping sets, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120 by 5 for hypertrophy, which is better when volume is the same. Definitely the first one. If you can do 80, 90, 100, 110, 120 for 5, it means that the first set is a joke, the second set is a joke, the third set, probably a joke. The fourth set might be getting a little bit challenging, and then the fifth set is kind of like your only working set. Now, this can work for strength pretty well, because I don't think it's actually that proximity to failure that matters all that much. But if you're trying to do this for hypertrophy, that is pretty darn close to useless, I would say. Might be some neurological benefits, but that's more on the strength side of things again. So I would just do a straight set. I also probably wouldn't necessarily do a 5x5. I would do 5x4 to 6 or 5x6 to 8. You want to have a rep range to ensure that every single set is quality. Because even when you're doing a 5x5, the first few sets might not be as close to failure as you would want them to be. It kind of depends on the movement. If it's a squat, you might not want to be quite as close to failure, which is why a 5x5 is actually very popular. But still, for hypertrophy, I would say the straight sets are better, but even then, it might not be the way to go. What are your thoughts on resistance band training systems such as Harambe or X3? The owner of X3 makes claims of 3 times the gains. Of course he does. Using his resistance band system compared to traditional weight training. No, these people are just... They have to make big claims because they want to sell their shitty product. So I would not. And usually, like, they funded the study, or they were involved with it, or they paid the people. And so, yeah, I would not. In general, I don't like resistance bands for hypertrophy much. Maybe in addition to the straight weight, but even then, I just don't think. Certainly not going to make 3 times the gains. I would say at the very, very most charitable, it's going to be similar or equal. And even then, I don't think it's going to be equal. I think it's going to be worse. Number 11, thoughts on the full body upper lower splits where you do just one working set for each exercise. That can work. Usually, if it's a 1 set per exercise protocol, they have a lot of exercises. So they might say, yeah, I am hardcore. I do high intensity training. I do low volume. And I'm getting distracted because Jojo is licking a wall. Rah. Usually they have a whole bunch of exercises. Like, yeah, I do low volume back workouts. And then their last warm-up is suspiciously hard. Like, was that a working set or a warm-up? Nah, it's just a warm-up because it wasn't a total failure with force reps. Okay, all right, fair enough, I guess. But then they do diagonal pull downs, and then they do vertical pull downs, and then they do a chest supported row, and then they do a cable row, and then they do rear delts, and then they do back extensions, and then they do standing cable pullover, and then they do a dumbbell. They do like 7 or 8 exercises. And so, yeah, they did, I don't know, 14, 15, 16 working sets compared to what other people might define it as. So I think this can work, but that is super vague. And so it's a little bit hard to say without seeing the entire program. Next question. Back then, when you started gaining all of your muscle mass, hey, I'm still gaining, come on. For you personally, how important was protein before bed? How many hours before bed do you had and have your last meal, shake, snack, and what is it? Off season. I guess everything is an off season for me. Second, how many whole food meals do you eat in a day where you actually eat? Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Thanks, Geoff. So I don't think before bed protein is super important. I used to think it was more important than I do now. I would often have a casein shake. I would say for several years I would have a casein shake before bed. How much of a difference did it actually make? Do I have it still occasionally? Yeah, but if I don't remember, then I kind of just go to bed. I haven't really noticed any significant difference either way, either in the workout or progression. But then again, it's hard to measure because there's a lot of other variables going on. And so I think it maybe is very marginally more important, but certainly not essential. Second, how many whole food meals do you have to eat in a day, or do you eat in a day? I would say probably 2 at the moment. So I will not eat in the morning, but I might have a coffee with protein powder in it, like a mocha. It sounds terrible, right? But it's coffee, and then it's like a chocolate protein powder, or a chocolate mint protein powder right now. It's pretty darn good, actually. So I'll have that in the morning, and then I'll go lift around 2, and then I'll get back around 4, 5, 6, somewhere on there. Depends on how long I work out, and if I walk afterwards. I'm not in a rush or anything, typically. And then I get back and I have my dinner, and then I might have a second dinner after. And so, yeah, I'm basically getting in 3 feedings. So 1 in the morning, and then I might have something during the workout, like a chocolate milk, sometimes, not always. And then I might have a post-workout, and then a meal later in the evening, and then maybe before bed. So it's like 3 to 5-ish protein feedings. And I think beyond 3 protein feedings, it probably does not matter very much. The main issue is when you're doing 1 meal a day and just not eating the whole day. I think that's where you're kind of missing some opportunities there. It's not necessarily that you can't make gains, but I do think they are going to be a little bit retarded. All right, next question. Is it always best to do your maximum recoverable volume for a given muscle? Like if I find I can get gains at 8 sets a week of biceps, but also 14 sets a week of biceps, should I keep doing more, even though it seems like the growth rate is similar? Also, if I find that I'm recovering fine on 14, would it be a good idea to slowly add volume over the next few months until I find the maximum volume that I can do? Would it also be a good idea to slowly try to find the maximum recoverable volume for each muscle, or would it be better to be more cautious and to keep doing what works until it stops? Also, would it be a good idea to add volume if you find your lift stall, lower volume, or do something else entirely? So there are a lot of questions there. I would definitely check out my books in this case. if you have not already. I guess if you already had them, you wouldn't really be asking a lot of this stuff. So definitely pick those up if you have not. When it comes to programming, that's going to be the best option. So I would say there's really no reason to force volume up if you are still making progress. You might find that you visually look a little bit fuller with the higher volume, but a lot of that is going to be like latent bloat and inflammation. So I would go based on strength progression over exactly how you look. I mean, trying to assess muscle growth visually or even through measurements is going to be tough, right? Because things are naturally going to slow down a little bit, especially as you're going from beginner to intermediate, which it sounds like you probably are. And so you might find that what you did before seems to work better, but that's just because you were newer. And of course, anything is going to work better. So this is actually quite difficult to assess. But I would say if you're making progress on 8, I wouldn't necessarily be in a rush to get to 14, right? There's this theoretical curve of, oh, if I do more and the same, I'm getting the same results, maybe I'm at the same spot, but on different parts of the curve. But I would say there are drawbacks to doing more, right? It takes more time, it's tougher to recover from, you are maybe squeezing out other volume that you could be doing on other areas. So you could be impacting your set quality as well. Maybe you're not as mentally focused because you're doing way too many sets. And so, yeah, just because you seem to be growing the same on 14, I would probably actually go for 8 if growth seems to be similar. And then you can always add more later. I do think some experimentation is fine, but it makes the most sense to experiment when what you're doing right now is not working. If what you're doing is working, kind of just wait until that stops, and then you can choose what course to proceed on. Is it a better idea to target a certain muscle with successive movements within a single session or to space them out to avoid fatigue overlap? For example, hack squat immediately followed by leg extension, or maybe even a more nuanced example, a bench press followed by a JM press. I've seen some routines where examples like this are right after the other, and others where they are more sporadic. So yeah, good question. I personally like to kind of space them out. So if I'm doing a leg day, maybe I'll start with a quad dominant movement, then I'll move to more of a hinge, and then I'll go maybe back to a squat. But I wouldn't probably personally go squat, hinge, although I don't think the difference would be dramatic or drastic either. And the main reason is just to have a more high quality performance, right? If you're tired, you're probably going to feel like it's doing more, right? Like if you do a shitload of leg extensions and then go to the hack squat or vice versa, you'll probably feel your quads more, but that's mostly just because they're tired. I don't think that's necessarily that they're getting a better stimulus. If anything, you're probably going to get better stimulus if you are a little bit fresher. You're not going to be totally fresh, but you've freshened up a little bit with something else in the middle, and then you can go back to it. So I would say in most cases, I would go based on performance, which means you want to space things out at least a little bit. But again, I don't think this is going to be a huge factor. If I want to gain more muscle or add strength for a given body part, it is only logical to train that body part more, right? Say, if I want to grow my forearms or improve my grip strength or want to isolate it, does it make sense to train it more like 3 to 4 times a week instead of just twice per week? So, why not 5 times a week? Why not 6 times a week? Why not every day? Why not twice a day? Why not 3 times a day? Why not all the time? Just do all the sets. Do 10 times per day, 70 times per week. If you're not working out 70 times per week, you're a slacker. So I hope you get what I'm trying to say here. There are definitely diminishing returns to frequency. And if you can't grow well on twice per week, I'm not sure if 3 or 4 times per week is the answer for hypertrophy. Now, for strength, that extra practice could be a good idea, especially on more technical movements. There's a reason why squat every day is a thing. Well, Clarence Kennedy said, like, if I missed a day of squatting, I would be 5 kilos weaker the next time. Just one day he missed, and he would be noticeably weaker. Now you might say, 5 kilos, that's not a lot. For him, that might be like a year of progress, right? So the thing is, when you start doing high frequency for strength, you kind of have to keep doing it. And so you get this nice bump in performance from the frequency, but then you kind of are tied to it, right? You're almost like a slave to that frequency. And then for hypertrophy, I find twice per week is the way to go. 3 times per week for small muscle groups might be a decent thing to try. 4 times per week, maybe short term, could be good. I mean, I did the small off squat program where you're squatting 4 times a week. It's rough. You seem like you have trouble recovering, but then like you figure it out. You work it out and you make it happen. But I think that your risk of injury might be higher, especially on these big movements. And this is more of a short-term strategy in a lot of cases. And then some areas you genuinely can work pretty much every day. Like you can do abs every day, forearms, probably calves. These smaller muscle groups that just seem to recover faster, you can hit them pretty frequently. And yeah, if someone says, oh, I want to maximize my forearm size, should I hit them once a week or twice? Twice for sure. 3 times, maybe some small benefits, but then 4, 5, 6. Short term, maybe some small benefits, but yeah, longer term, I would say somewhere between 2 and 3 is the way to go for most areas. Hey, Geoff, in regards to progressions, should you add weight when you reach the top end of your set rep range for the first set, or do you have to hit the top range for all sets on a given exercise? Okay, so I think you're saying if you have, let's say, a double progression and you're doing 3 sets of 8 to 12, do you have to hit 12 for all sets before you go up in weight? I would say generally no, because what happens if you get 12, 12, 11, and you almost get 12? Should you try to get 12, 12, 12 next session? No, I would say you're kind of wasting your time. So you can go up in weight for that first set, and then maybe your second set, and maybe even your third set as well. Let's say you get 10 reps on the first set when you bumped up the weight. The next set you get 8 reps because you're fatigued. Then you can go down in weight. As an overarching rule, you want to be in the rep range and have it be challenging for all sets. If you sticking to having to do 12, 12, 12 before progressing means the first and second sets are being sandbagged, you're kind of missing the point of the rep range. So I would say, yeah, go up in weight when you can and you're still in the rep range. And sometimes you might even sink out of the rep range and it's not the end of the world. You're right. If you do, say, 10 reps for the first set, 8 reps for the second set, and you're like, screw it, I just want to stick with this weight, and you get 7 or 6 reps, that's fine. It's not the end of the world. Or you can reduce. As long as you are working hard and you're close to failure and you're in a reasonable rep range, which is pretty darn big, like 5 to 35, then you are fine. Next question. What do you think about the whole hybrid athlete thing? Do you view it as an abomination coming as a result from putting running and resistance training in a blender? Or do you view it as a valid way to train? I wouldn't say you fall into that category necessarily, but being one of the most jacked natty influencers around while still running every so often, as far as I can remember, you seem like the right person to ask. So I don't run very much, especially when bulked up. I still can run. I would say it's a little bit tough to say because I haven't really tested it out since the calf tweak. But I think in July I was running quite a bit, and I would say I was probably in like somewhere between 5.5 to 6 minute mile shape, which is pretty good for being 220-ish pounds. And that was with pretty little training. I have a lot of leftovers from 10 years as a distance runner, basically. So I would say it's fine. Yeah, I'm not very judgmental generally, just as a person. If someone wants to train in a certain way, I'm ambivalent. I just don't have the energy to judge that because I don't really care. Right now, if someone said, oh yeah, hybrid training, this is way better for muscle growth than just bodybuilding training, yeah, that's where I'm like, yeah, no, you're full of shit. But if someone says, yeah, I do this because I like to put my foot in both pools at once. That's not a phrase. Who says that? Yeah, I don't know what I was trying to say there. Stick my toe in the water of both pools of water? More coffee. But yeah, it's fine. You can certainly go probably further than most people think. I would say you can reach 90, maybe 95% of your potential, but you might want to have a phasic structure where okay, now I'm going to spend a year or two more on bodybuilding, and now I'm going to spend a year or two more on running, and not more on running, but more about that running life. So yeah, it's fine to do whatever the fuck you want to do. Okay, train however you want. And if someone says that's bad, well, fuck them. One of your main arguments when debunking the natty limit is that lifters are not bulking properly, are scared of gaining fat, and not eating enough. I know you eat intuitively and currently aren't tracking macros, correct? But if you have a general ballpark goals you try to hit every day macro-wise, please share with us. I do not have any macro goals, either protein, carbs, fats, alcohol. I don't have any goals in terms of those. I would say most likely it's somewhere in the 3,000s. Somewhere in the 3,000s. Probably mid to high 3,000s when bulking up. Just based on when I did count calories and my experience. Because I know how to do it. I did it for many years. I still have clients sometimes track. And so I know roughly how many calories I'm probably taking in. Likely high 3,000s, maybe the occasional low 4,000 day. Probably some 3,000-ish calorie days. It does vary a bit, but it's not something that I really worry about. I do weigh myself on a pretty regular basis, though, and so I'm not necessarily tracking the input, I'm tracking the output. I do think eating roughly the same times per day and eating roughly the same amounts per day is important. So, I have certain foods that I like, certain meals that I have. I don't necessarily cook anymore because I'm pretty busy. But I order from the same places. I can eyeball things. I can say, okay, that's a reasonable portion. Most restaurants here in China also just give you a reasonable portion. Whereas if I lived in the States, the plates are like this big compared to most other places where they're this big. So these things kind of sort themselves out, but it depends on your food environment. If you live with a whole bunch of obese people and you were obese growing up and the portion sizes are massive, you might need to sort of readjust for that. How do I deal with plateaus on both bulks and cuts? On a bulk, if I'm already bulked up, a plateau is kind of what I want because I don't necessarily want to be gaining weight past a certain point. Roughly 20-ish% body fat, maybe 22, somewhere around there. And if I'm cutting and I have a plateau, I'll wait it out for a week or two. But if it's still there, I will either increase my activity, my steps, maybe my cardio, or I will eat a little bit less. And I will accept maybe a little bit more hunger in the evening and say, okay, maybe I'll eat a little bit more fruits and vegetables. Maybe I'll cut out certain higher energy density foods. And so it's not like I'm flying blind. That's what people think when I say I don't count macros. No, I know enough to where I don't have to track. Right? If you don't know anything about nutrition, you might need to track in order to gain that knowledge and be able to hopefully eventually not track. And so when people are like, how do you not track? It's because I did track for many years, and a lot of it is based on intuition and then the knowledge that supports that intuition. Next question, what are your thoughts on people with Paul Carter's training philosophy, where he suggests only full body 3 times or upper lower 2 times due to the accumulated fatigue? He says working out 6 days per week is too fatiguing, possibly leading to less motor unit recruitment, probably. I'd really like to hear your opinion on this since I believe your training style may be the direct opposite of his. So think about if you're doing an upper-lower split. So maybe you do lower one day, then upper, and then you take a day off, then lower, then upper, and then 2 days off, right? So you're working out 4 days per week and you have 3 days off. What would happen if you took the isolation from that upper day and you moved it to the next day? Same volume, same sets, same reps, everything. You're just moving that last isolation, because you're usually doing it at the end, 24 hours later. How is that going to be fatiguing? If anything, you're going to get better quality training, and yes, you have less days off, but if the overall workload is the same or very similar, I don't see how that is going to be accumulating fatigue. Now, if you are just absolutely crushing yourself and you are accumulating fatigue, do a little bit less. It's not necessarily the days per week. It's what you are doing on those days. And if you're doing, if you're doing upper, lower, upper, lower, upper, lower, 6 days per week, that's what natural hypertrophy was doing for a while. That is tough. That is brutal. I think he actually switched to lower twice per week. And I was almost wondering, like, when is he going to switch to lower twice per week? Because lower 3 times per week is rough, especially he's pretty darn strong as well. So, yeah, I would say if you're doing full body 6 days per week and you're just absolutely crushing it every day, it's too much. But if 2 of those days of the 6 days are a few sets of curls, a few sets of extensions, some lateral delts, maybe a little bit of rear delts, maybe some abs, what fatigue are you accumulating? That's all low fatigue shit, which is part of the reason why you have it all on that day. It is more fatiguing than a day off, but it's also that the upper days are less fatiguing because you moved a whole chunk of it to the next day. So, yeah, he has me blocked, so I can't really check a lot of his philosophies. He seems to be a little bit sensitive and blocks people very, very easily. So I can't necessarily check all of his philosophies. Maybe you shouldn't block people for no fucking reason, right? I don't know. You might actually get people to hear you out if you don't block them. But I think both are fine. He is very, very dogmatic. He is very, very aggressive online, weirdly so. I guess it's part of his personality or just part of his branding. But yeah, I certainly don't agree with him. Next question, what music do you listen to? Do you have a go-to lifting genre or playlist? I do not have a lifting playlist. I actually just listen to the music in the gym. Sometimes which is actually pretty decent, but sometimes is absolutely terrible. So, Katy Perry or something will be playing in the background and you're getting ready for a max set of deadlifts. And I take great pride in being able to get swifty to any type of music. Baby, you work, firework, because you know that you're toxic. Yeah, rock, rap, techno, a little bit of metal, pop. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I'm pretty much all over the place, and I have a pretty wide range of what I enjoy, but I actually don't listen to it when I'm training. Sometimes on cardio, but when I'm training, I actually kind of just like to have my silence. I know that sounds weird, but it's how I am. All right, question number 1. I feel like the most debated thing in the hypertrophy sector right now is volume. High volume with 40 plus sets a week or low volume with 3 to 6 sets per week. I'm definitely spinning my wheels with the different information. What are your recommendations for volume sets per week? So this is quite interesting. You're spinning your wheels doing which? Because spinning your wheels means you're not going anywhere. So have you tried high volume? Have you tried low volume? I would start with low volume. To me, it does not make sense, especially as a beginner or even maybe as an early intermediate, to go right to high volume, right? You would want to start with lower volume and have the quality of the set be high. So first, nail your technique. And this is going to have to maybe change over time. I don't have the same technique as I did 2 years ago or 4 years ago or 6 years ago. So it is something that will change most likely. And it probably should change as you were trying to find how to get the most out of every single set. But try to have reasonable technique, control, but not excessively control where you're laboriously focusing on the eccentric. So maybe on the eccentric, a couple seconds, maybe a little bit faster on shorter range motion movements, maybe a little bit longer on if you're doing like a deficit deadlift or something. Although on a deficit deadlift, you might not want to control the eccentric, so it is movement dependent. But first, nail your technique. Then try to get better at pushing your sets. This is a skill as well. I'm training closer to failure on getting the slower, grindier reps while still maintaining your technique. And then you should be making progress doing this with fairly low volume. Maybe 2 sets twice a week per muscle group. Maybe a little bit more. Maybe 6 sets total. That's fine as well. But I would say if you're a beginner especially, and you can't make progress with 6 sets per muscle group per week, I would go back and then look at either the technique or the effort proximity to failure, right? Because usually one of those is going to drop off as you eagerly add volume. And I've been there. I've been there where I was doing a ton of volume, lots and lots of volume. And on some muscle groups, I think that can make sense for some people. I'm still a high volume guy, I would say, but I have reduced my volume quite a bit in the last couple years, I would say, because if you're doing 10 sets for a muscle group twice a week, some of those are probably going to end up being lower quality, either in terms of the focus or the technique or that aggression or that proximity to failure. And so, yeah, I'm not in a rush to add volume. I always try to either go with the technical side of thing or the exercise selection or that effort compared to just adding sets, right? Because, all right, I'll put it this way. How often do I see someone do a set in the gym and think, wow, he fucking nailed that, or she nailed it? Almost never. Very, very rarely do I see a set in the gym and go, wow, nice. Nice. I mean, we're talking like maybe 2 or 3% of sets I see where I'm like, wow, that was productive. You actually fucking nailed that. And so I would say for most people in the gym, and I do mean most, I mean the vast majority of people, adding more sets is just like adding bags of shit to a pile. Like, yeah, there's more stuff there, but it's still shit. So focus on having your sets be less shit and then maybe adding more. And you might find that, oh, actually, when I do lower volume and the sets are super high quality in terms of the technique, in terms of how close they are to failure, I can progress really well, and I'm actually growing better on lower volume. And I was even at the point where I was doing like 40 sets for back per week, and a lot of them were genuinely beyond failure, but the technical side of things was often lacking. And I think sometimes I would start cheating before I was actually at failure. And in a lot of cases, you're just doing the set to write it down in your training log. I think you're missing the whole point if you're like, well, I'm going to do 40 sets, and then you're reverse engineering the thing, but actually you should start with the high quality set and then add them up. Not saying, oh, I have to do this many sets, and then it just doesn't work very well. So start with that high quality set and then build up as needed if you plateau and you feel good and you feel like you are recovering. And this is where in the literature, I think there's a little bit of a divide between that and what a lot of people actually do. And so why is there that divide? Are they just not training as hard? Are there some technical issues? I've seen some studies where the technique is just not good. Let's put it that way. Like, I can tell they're just not moving as productively as they could or should. And so I could probably have them do less volume. And if I was coaching them, they would move differently and they would get more out of the lower volume. So yeah, this is where the literature, there's clearly some relationship between volume and hypertrophy, but if you are having high quality sets, each set is going to be both more stimulatory and more fatiguing. And so you not only don't need as much, but you can't handle as much. And so, yeah, I would say low volume is the best place to start, and then you can scale up as needed over time. Anyway, for more about training, you can check out my website, verityfit.com, for my books. They will treat you right. A ton of information there if you want to know about the nitty-gritty nuances of training to get jacked. That is the best place to go. Thanks so much, and thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.
Turtle.